Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones DDS. We're part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, Luke Wyatt. We'll talk mostly baseball, so let's get right into our interview with Luke. Luke Wyatt joins us. It's Wednesday morning. We've switched things up a little bit here at the podcast. We usually have Luke on Mondays. We've got some ideas as to things we want to do potentially. Luke comes on and talks baseball with me, but we've got a couple things potentially cooking for some broader shows. And for that reason, for the time being, I've moved Chip to Mondays and Luke to Wednesdays. I don't know if that lasts beyond this week or if we switch things back to you to Mondays or what, but just that is a way of letting the audience know, because I had some people ask why wasn't Luke on Monday. That was the plan, was maybe to pull you to Wednesday and talk baseball, but also some broader topics, whereas Chip and I usually just talk baseball. So with that, Luke, appreciate your flexibility, and I appreciate you joining us today.
Not a problem. I always enjoy talking Vanderbilt athletics, and it doesn't matter which day of the week. I'll be glad to talk about it. And got another win last night, so we're probably, I think, Chris, we're probably, if we go, what we got left? Let's see, we're 33 and 11. Got 11 games left. I think if we go 6-5, we'll be hosted all the way to Omaha.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm looking up, Boyd's World does an RPI needs report that is usually very helpful in terms of saying, well, if you want to get a top 8 RPI, then you need to win X amount of games, and X need to come on the road and X need to come on at home. And it usually it's just a number of wins totally, but sometimes it's a win difference based on where they are. But I'm rambling because I'm trying to find this. I don't think he's updated this recently, but I can maybe do some guesswork here based on what he's got. Let's see. He says Vanderbilt needs 8 home wins and 7 road wins, or it's got 8 home games and 7 road games. That's not true. I believe it is now 4 home games and 7 road games. So if I take what he's done, subtract out what's happened since, and presume nothing has changed, I can make a pretty good guess at where Vanderbilt's RPI is going to stand. Okay, Vanderbilt's already secured a top 32 RPI, and I think it needed 5 home wins, and it got 4 since then. So I think Vanderbilt needs 1 more home win to get a top 16 RPI. To get a top 8 RPI secured based on the regular season, it said 4 home wins, 4 road wins was one possibility. Well, 4 home wins have already come. So win 4 on the road from here on out, or just win 7 at home, period, which Arkansas is coming up. That's a possibility in between 5 home wins, 3 road wins, 6 home wins, 1 road win. So Vanderbilt basically needs to win about 8 games to be sure it is in the top 8 of the RPI from when this was last updated. What's already taken care of 4. So 4 is kind of your magic number of wins to get a top 8 RPI. Now, having said that, if it's 3 midweek wins, or I guess just 2 more midweek games. So yeah, I guess if it's 2 and 2, they may be in some trouble. But if you just want a guide as to what that number looks like, there you go.
Yeah, I think you're correct there. Now, one of the midweek wins will be against, I think Louisville's out of the top 25, but I know they have a strong RPI. So if you beat Louisville, that is a feather in your cap. The MTSU game is another story. But if Louisville's one of those wins, that's almost as helpful as the conference game, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think just for optics, conference record matters. Right. And it's one of those things that, let's just say everything went really, really poorly, and they decide, well, the SEC's only going to get 4 national seeds, and say Vandy ends up at 17 and 13, and you got 4 other teams above them in the standings, then that's where I could see it going poorly. I'm just trying to cover all my bases here. And by the way,
Right.
my apologies. That was long-winded podcasting earlier. I could have made that much simple. But the bottom line is, win 5 or 6 more games, however they come, and I think they're in great shape to host, and probably going to be hard-pressed not to host all the way to Omaha.
Right. I was very encouraged by last night. I tell you why. Jack Anderson's emerging as a guy who can give you an inning. I know he wasn't great last night. I can see his stuff being able to get you 3 outs. And that's good to have a guy like that you could bring in, say, in the 6th inning, or for starters, pitch count's really high and you need to get through the 5th or something like that. And that's just another, with him and Grayson Moore, who looked really good when he came back. If you can get an inning or 2 or 3 batters out of those guys, adding to the rest of the staff getting back, that's a great sign.
I was thinking this morning, and I don't know if this is what he was thinking or not, but we sit here and we go, well, they've got Holton back, they've got Owen back, and we tend to lock that in. Well, nothing stays stationary, especially in baseball, and particularly with pitchers. I mean, it might. They've had a pretty decent track record with pitching health compared to most programs. But I was thinking, for argument's sake, last night they give Carter 4+ innings. I didn't get to watch it really, other than an inning or two. I had a school thing for my daughter, and then Oreo needed to walk when I got home. So mostly what I did was following on Stat Tracker and listening a little bit on the radio or the app on the phone. And in any case, they stretched Carter out last night. It went decently well for 4 innings. The 5th, it looked like he lost his control, walked and hit a couple of guys. Anderson came in and had some hiccups, but ended up pitching well enough to keep them a few runs ahead. You saw Anderson pitch that high-leverage situation against Kentucky, I think, to everybody's surprise. But people are going, why did they need to do that? They had Maldonado. They had Ryan Ginther maybe available more. That might be a situation where, first of all, you never know where a guy in a spot against particular batters with the style he's got. In other words, does he throw a slider that gives righties trouble, or whatever you want to pick out of your bag of tricks there is kind of a one-off situation. That is an option maybe. There's something in the matchup with him and certain hitters that's problematic for the guy in the other batter's box. The other thing is, let's say something happens with Holton or Owen. Then you're not going to cover this unless it's Riley, and I think Patrick Riley could be the answer. But then even if it is, then you need to move other guys down into the role that he would vacate as kind of your long guy, when it goes bad for Carter Holton like it did against Carolina, or a role like that where you're bringing him in as a piggyback guy when your guy falters. Well, if you take Riley out of that role and bring him into a starting role, then somebody's got to do what Patrick did. So point is, when you bump everybody down the line as roles are changed, there's a scenario in which they need a couple more arms if somebody gets hurt or whatever. And I think that stretching Anderson out in those things, I don't know if that was the thinking behind what they did, but that is just a theory I've got.
Well, last night, and of course I saw every pitch, Anderson struck out the side and then struck out the leadoff batter in the next inning. So he struck out 4 of it. His first 4 outs were all by strikeouts. And his what he does, and Corbs talks about this all the time, he loves older guys. And I know Jack has not pitched in high leverage situations much, but he is an older guy. And I think that's what Corb's thinking is.
Yeah.
Do I rather have him out there for an inning, or rather have Horn or J.D. Thompson? So I think Jack's kind of won that battle, and that's what Corbs is looking for, is someone just to get him through a tough spot, maybe an inning or 2 or 3 batters. And all it does is just add more depth. The other thing with pitching, I think, Chris, is when Buchanan does get back, which it's been forever, so you don't know how he's going to pitch, but when he gets back, if he can get some innings in Omaha, in Hoover, and where he can help as well, then you've got a depth of 13 or 14 pitchers that you can come out there and at least give you an inning.
I think I like their pitching situation heading into the postseason, barring nothing disastrous happens, better than anybody in the league.
Yeah, now I will say this. I think Tennessee's bullpen depth,
that might be my exception, is Tennessee, because Tennessee is starting to figure some things out. Yeah.
They have good bullpen depth. As much as it pains me to give them credit for anything, they do have good bullpen depth. I still think their starters are ordinary at this point. Beam's been better last week, of course, against Mississippi State. But Dolander has pitched. I mean, he's just been an average guy or below average guy. And then you got a kid how the Lindsey kid, how will he react in postseason when the lights get brighter? You take them out of their ballpark, they're a totally different team. And I think you'll see that this week in Athens.
Yeah, I would push back on ordinary. I think their rotation's really good. I think what has happened again is offense is so. The conditions in baseball, whether it's the bats, the balls, whatever, and we've talked about this just about every week, have put it to where you look at the numbers and they don't look good. Pitchers look shaky, but then you start comparing them to everybody else, and what looks shaky compared to what we used to expect 2 and 3 years ago now looks good. I think Tennessee's pitching is really good, starting and bullpen.
Yeah, if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'd be more excited about the bullpen, but I see what you're saying.
No, and I think them moving Burns to the bullpen was a great move because it accentuates what he does well. Yes.
Yes, he does. Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, back to Vandy. I think, was it 3 or 4 long balls last night?
4 solos.
4, okay. And Georgia State hit a couple too, I believe.
Yeah, they have a really good lineup. Georgia State can hit. Their pitching depth was not good. Most of their guys they brought in had ERAs in the 6 or 7s, but their hitting lineup they can mash. They just come off. They won 4 in a row and they'd beaten Georgia last week. So in the midweek, beat them 7-5. So they're legitimate. That's a good win for Vanderbilt, actually.
By the way, Vandy moved up from 5 to 6, from 6 to 5 in the RPI by virtue of Arkansas losing to Lipscomb last night. Yeah,
and congratulations to Lipscomb. That's a big win for them to go into.
Did you see he pitched a couple innings and pitched well?
Ethan Smith, yeah,
he did. Good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
I hope that has a better ending. That could have gone so many different ways for him at Vandy.
Oh, that kid's been through a lot in the last year or so. It's at Tennessee. I don't think he pitched, but maybe an inning up there the whole year he was there. Yeah. So that didn't work out. Chris, I want to talk about something, if you don't mind. You and Chip talked about on your podcast that you mentioned about moving Maldonado to the 2 or whatever. I was kind of move Polk to 2, and then I heard Coach Corbin was on a radio station here in town and mentioned that he liked Diaz in the 2-hole, even though his average wasn't as good as Polk's because of his patience. So that was his brought up on the radio yesterday, and that was his answer to that. So because I had said Polk to the 2-hole and moved Diaz to 8.
Yeah, one thing that I appreciate more about Tim from covering him as long as I did, I was a stats and analytics guy long before that became in vogue. And so I didn't like some of the bunting and things they did. And I would still push back against some of those. But there are just so many things in baseball that are hard to quantify. One of them is using pitches, right? And I think Diaz does that. He'll foul some balls off. I think the lefty-righty thing is something that's hard to quantify because if you're going to go to a lefty specialist, if you've got lefties stacked, then the guy maybe pitches to several batters, whereas if you're alternating left, right, left, maybe he gets one guy if the right-hander behind him is really good. I think that bunting and things like that, it puts a pressure on a defense that's hard to quantify, and I think all the formulas and things were done at the major league level where they field substantially better, and certainly third base defense is highly variable at the college level, whereas at the major league level, you're not going to put a butcher out there at third for very long. So I do think that the things that Tim does now that sort of defy the analytics, I'm not saying he always makes the right choice, but there's a lot more things that I understand after watching it day to day for 20 years and knowing how he thinks that maybe I didn't 10 or 12 years ago.
Yes. My concerns right now, Chris, is I was hoping last night We were able to get Leneve, McKenzie, J.D. Rogers, some of those guys a couple at bats. We're in a situation right now where our depth is if anyone's wanting to know my concerns with this team, it would be that. If we get an injury or two, we have, like Leneve's only got 8 at bats, and we don't have anybody right now that's proven off the bench except for Calvin Hewitt. And then, of course, whoever doesn't start at catcher. So I'm a little concerned with that because at some point you're going to need those guys. And I just wish last night the game would have been a big enough of a blowout where those guys could have gotten the game. But to Georgia State's credit, they kept it close where we couldn't really do that.
If you're going to bring a guy out of the deep freeze in a situation like that, I suspect it's J.D. Rogers based on the stuff that I found out preseason. They think he's a kid that can defensively be good enough to play center field. He's a good hitter. He's strong. You think he's won their Omaha Challenge a couple times. My guess, if there's an impact bat that's been sort of a non-factor all year that emerges in a situation like that it's him. I mean, also, Leneve is maybe a better bet depending on where it is, but I think Rogers gives him some things defensively that maybe Leneve does not. Right,
that's for sure. And the Arias kid is basically just a defensive specialist. I don't know where else you turn. I don't think you can. None of the freshmen, I guess they're all redshirting. Kadali and Holbrooks and Matt Wolf. I assume they're all just redshirting. And the catcher, Poteet.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that has to be. And it's going to be interesting. They're going to be in that same situation where they're probably going to have a lot of high draftable kids that are going to be tough to get to campus. If you want to watch something, someone had posted this on our board. I've not really checked into it, but I think Corbin had mentioned something about maybe Nolan coming back for another year next year, which would really be a big boost for them. And Bolger's another one where I don't know that Bolger is going to be the draftable guy we thought he would have been a few years ago. I mean, you could see a Dominic Keegan situation or something like that where he comes back for another year and spends another year behind the plate. Now, if they do that next year, in addition to the pitching they've got coming back, I mean, I don't want to – used to be able to say this with more certainty. Now with the portal, you never know. LSU will just go – and Tennessee will just go get whole new teams the way they hit the portal, right, maybe. But I would think that they would be if you want to look way ahead for next year, they would be a strong bet to be a preseason number one at this point, I would think, especially if those two things happen.
I think so. The one thing that would concern me if Jack comes back is would Espinal transfer?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, you might see. Well, I guess they're covered at catcher either way, right?
Well, you have Poteet, and then I think they got one other coming in the next class. But I interesting where I think moving forward you may see 2 and 2. Espinal catching 2 games the midweek and game 3, and Bolger catching games 1 and 2.
Yeah, what did you make of Espinal getting the second straight start yesterday?
Well, I don't think Bolger's hurt. He may be, and we don't know that. I don't think anyone's asked that question to Corbs. And it could be just the fact that, how he responded under pressure the other day with the big double, what would have been a double, the game-winning walk-off. And, he's starting to foul off. I shouldn't say hit. He's starting to foul off pitches that he can't hit, some breaking balls that he's always had trouble with. He's starting to not swing and miss on those as much. He's fouling them away until they finally throw him a fastball, and he's taking advantage of it. And I just think, and he's such a energetic kid. He seems to be a very so much a team favorite. Brings a lot of energy, and defensively, he's better than Jack.
You raise a really good point, and I think we talked about it the other day, Chip and I did, but that last at bat, because what has been giving him fits, I think at times, has been breaking stuff and off-speed stuff and things out of the zone, and they brought in a kid who I don't know what Ryder Giles tops out at, maybe 82, 83, but it was breaking ball 68, 69, 70. It was just one after another, and it was change locations and throw him off the plate and see if he'll chase. And he didn't chase the ones that I think Kentucky was hoping he should chase and shouldn't have chased, but That's what young raw hitters do sometimes, is chase stuff like that. And he did get his bat on and foul off a few things, and then he finally did hit. After seeing the velo enough times, he did hit 70 to center hard to walk it off. So maybe Tim Corbin is seeing it exactly the way that you just explained it.
Yeah, I think so. And that's exciting because you can still, Jack's an enigma. At times, Jack, you think, wow, here he is. Because sometimes he can barrel up balls. And I will say this, he's probably hit in tougher luck than anybody else on this team. He'll go through a stint where he'll barrel up balls and get an 0 for 4 2 or 3 times. And then he'll get a bloop that falls in, which that's just baseball, I understand. But it seems like Jack has more of his share of that than anybody on this team.
Yeah, let's see. Yesterday they did move Maldonado up to the 5, which I like. They did move Austin up to cleanup, which I'd floated that the other day.
I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I just threw some things out at random, and the lineup looked a lot more like what Chip and I talked about on Monday, on Wednesday, or excuse me, on Tuesday.
Well, I think what Corbs and Baxter does is they listen to your podcast and then say, well, Chris has to do this, so we'll do it.
I think that's exactly how it goes. I mean, I've done so well for myself in this space here that I just get asked for my advice all the time. So, it's getting deep in here. Let's see. What else stands out of the box score? Espinal again got 2 hits. Nolan got 2 hits.
Yeah, and hit the ball well. His home run was over the bleachers. He killed it.
They only walked twice yesterday. That's odd.
Yeah. Well, we only struck out 5 times. I like that.
Yeah.
I think Bass has struck out 2 or 3 times. He is the only one that really struggled at the plate. He did get a hit, but did strike out a couple of times. But you had to really nitpick to find anything wrong with last night. Now, the first 3 innings, it was sleepwalking. We didn't get a hit till the 4th inning, and then we go 3 straight home runs.
Yeah, strikeouts were the thing that everybody really griped about the last few years, but they strike out, let's see, as you said, 5 times yesterday. They struck out, 9 times on Sunday. They struck out 6 times on Saturday. They struck out 4 times on Friday. That's, man, in this day and age of baseball, that's not a lot.
No, that's great. I'll take that the rest of the year. One quick thing back, this just crossed my mind about pitching. The Horn kid came in last night, and he gave up a home run. His fastball was straight as a string, but his breaking ball is nasty. If he can get to where he can locate that fastball better, he can really help you because, I mean, his breaking ball breaks a ton on righties and lefties. It may have just been coincidence, 2 or 3 left-handers, but they were perfect pitches. I mean, you could stand up there with a boat oar and not hit those things.
Yeah, Horn was a guy that I think got some preseason pub. I think D1 had him as listed as like one of the 50 impact freshmen in the league. And I think, what was the injury with him? Oh, it was an appendix thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, he had to have his appendix removed.
Yeah. So that'll keep you out. That's keeping our star shortstop on my son's team out for a couple of weeks. So,
well, that's not good.
No, it's not.
Horn's fastball last night, and I don't guess you got to see any of it. It was just straight as a string, Chris. It had no movement, and I think it's a 4-seamer. That's got to change for him to be successful because as well as I do, good hitters are going to just wait on it and pound it.
Yeah, here's another thing. That's 2 straight scoreless outings for Leboki. Just 1 inning at a time, which is kind of interesting. His last 3 outings have been 1 inning at a time. They've all been scoreless. I'm trying to think. I believe in Knoxville he pitched multiple innings. I'm flipping through box scores here. Yeah, he pitched 3 1/3, gave up 4 earned. That was in that disaster, the 17-1 game. Yeah. Before that, let's see. The last time he pitched would have been when? He pitched 2 innings against South Carolina, gave up 7.
Did he not pitch in game 1? No, he didn't pitch against Kentucky.
No, well, he pitched twice. against Kentucky, I believe. Let me double check.
Why do I mean? He must not.
We're
given
talking
up
about
anything.
Leboke, right?
Yes, Sam Leboke. Yes.
Yeah, he pitched. He pitched an inning on Saturday. Oh, I'm sorry. I've got the dates mixed up here. He pitched an inning on Saturday. Okay, I guess he only pitched once against Kentucky. He must have thrown the midweek game. But anyway, what I'm getting at, there's a method to this. I'm wondering if they've maybe now decided that he is better one inning at a time rather than maybe once or twice through the lineup kind of role. Maybe that's just the way it panned out, but that's what I was looking for.
And that's what I'm saying, Chris. I think you look at Leboke, Anderson, and Grayson Moore to get you an inning each. Think about that. You get those 3 innings covered with those guys, then you've got Ginther and Maldonado on the back end. That means your starter only has to give you 5.
Right. I mean, if they just stay healthy.
Yep, we've talked about that.
They can win the whole thing. They really can.
Yeah, and the other thing is that we're power throughout the lineup, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I mentioned when we first talked before the season started, and we were concerned about power, and I said, well, Shrek would maybe hit 15 or so, but you've got a lot of guys that are going to hit between 8 and 10, and that's what's happened. We've got a bunch of guys hitting 4, 5, 6, 7 home runs. So that's the good thing about our lineup. You can put it in a hat, shuffle it up, reach in and grab a lineup, and anybody can bite you. A lot of teams don't have that. The bottom 3 in a lot of orders just don't hurt you much on most days. But our lineup, any of the guys 1 through 9 can really hurt you at any time.
Okay, this is a sidebar, and I have not watched them a lot. I just kind of follow the scores and the stats, and I've looked at the stat sheet a few times this season. I think Wake Forest is the best team in the country, man.
I've seen them play once. Yeah.
The middle of their order, they got guys. Nick Kurtz has hit 14 home runs. Justin Johnson's hit 11. Brock Wilken has hit 20. Those guys have walked 39, 20, and 43 times. They have got, my goodness, their whole lineup almost has walked more than it's struck out.
Yeah, they're impressive.
They got a kid coming off the bench that's hit 9 home runs. They've hit 83 home runs. You never see this. They have walked 300 times. They've struck out 323. Now, look, the schedule they played has not been the one Vandy or LSU have played, but the ACC is pretty good. And this is where I think they're really scary. They're guys in their rotation. Rhett Lauder has started 11 games, 68 and 2/3 innings, 183 ERA. Josh Hartle, 62 innings, 218. Sean Sullivan, 50 innings, 250 ERA. That's their starting 3 guys. Nobody in the country's got that. Oh, and by the way, they got a swing guy who's thrown 43 and 2/3 innings, struck out 56, walked 9, and has a .2 ERA.
Now is that
and then they got about another 4 guys in the bullpen that they're good. 3 have been great, and one of them's been fine. Now, they go about 8 deep, and it looks like it hits a cliff there potentially. They got a couple other guys, but I'm telling you, that is your team to watch. I know and there's a lot of talk about the SEC, and a lot of LSU's been number 1 all year, but I'm thinking as great as the SEC is, the best team may be Wake Forest.
I tend to agree with you. I really do. And like I said, I haven't seen them play live but once. I watched one full game against, I think it was Clemson, and they look great. They do. They look solid. And if you look at their stats, in fact, the reason why I knew about the home runs that you were just speaking of is the team we played last night was just ahead of them. They had, I think Georgia State has hit 92 home runs.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe get the 2 or 3 seed in this thing, and that way you're probably paired. I don't know if it depends on whether Wake gets the 1 seed or not. I think I wouldn't mind being paired with LSU on that side of the bracket and letting maybe someone else try to knock out Wake.
Chris,
rather than you be on their half of the Omaha. Yeah.
I have a question for you. You know this better than me. In basketball, postseason tournaments, conference tournaments don't mean much. We've seen that. In baseball, does it matter much there as well?
I think it matters where you're trying to clarify something in terms of who gets in. I've seen a lot of years where there was an SEC team on the bubble, and especially when you get those Tuesday games where you got two teams that are, 13 and 17 or 14 and 16 or something like that. I think if you're looking for a tie break to put a team in or leave a team out, a lot of times I think they mean something. Maybe as it pertains to moving a national seed a spot or two, if a team wins a tournament, maybe they move up a seed line or two, but I don't think it means a lot. I think that most of it's going to be settled before you go to the tournaments. And I've said this before, I think that this year, to me, if you're Vanderbilt, I just don't think that you need, barring something bad happening between now and in a couple of weeks when they start this thing, or I guess 3 weeks, I just don't see a big run in Hoover being something that they're probably going to need and maybe not something that's beneficial either.
Yeah, I think Hoover, we use what I talked about, getting those other guys some at bat.
Yep.
And then using these bullpen guys, starting a Grayson Carter maybe. Now Tim Steele will probably go with the starting rotation first 3 games you play at Hoover. But after that, get these other guys some innings.
Shall we do the mailbag?
I'd love to.
All right, let me find it.
That'd be good.
You would think I would have this ready.
Did Oreo eat the mailbag?
No, not yet. That guy got a haircut yesterday. He needed it. He's been a handful. I'm surprised we haven't heard the howling that everybody's accustomed to hearing. That happened all morning. For some reason, it has not happened during the podcast. But it's not over. Okay. Here's the mailbag. It is sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call. That number, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. Okay, B3 Vandy. Interesting that Jack Anderson has stepped up and won the last 2 games for Vandy. What other pitchers does Vandy have that may step up their game and really surprise us in the upcoming weeks? I think we hit most of that, but I will give you a shot if we miss something.
Well, I of course, Anderson, Grayson Moore being back is key. And then if you can get Dukanich at some point, I know maybe even if it's not until Hoover, that can come in, then I think that would be great to add 3 arms to get you possibly through 2 or 3 innings.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing. It's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. Go Doors 94. What are the team's greatest weaknesses? Can they improve in these areas this season?
Well, bullpen health or pitching health. Let me just say that. It's not a weakness, but it's a concern. And then my biggest concern I just mentioned earlier in the podcast is depth off the bench. I know a lot of teams don't have depth. I understand that. But ours is concerning because of the limited at-bats they've had.
Yeah, I would say that, and maybe just not having quite the home run prowess that some of these other teams have.
I don't worry about that, Chris, and I tell you why. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I mean, the parks will change that, but...
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
But, I mean, you saw that bite Kentucky a little bit this weekend.
It did, but the way they play anyway, they're going to give anybody problems in any park, I think, because they're going.
Yeah.
If you got a weak defensive team, they're going to make you catch it. They're going to put it in play. They're going to move runners. They're going to distract you with their base running. They are. I agree with Corbs, and you could tell by his tone he was really worried about that series because Kentucky can turn you around and make you go south in a hurry if you're not on your P's and Q's, so to speak.
I guess it's because they're Kentucky. I think if you put a different uniform on that and make a Mississippi State or whatever, people view that team differently. I think, and again, I've watched them all year, followed them. I think that they got some issues. I don't think they have dominant pitching, but they've got that Mississippi State style staff, although they don't have the top two guys like a Sims and a Bednar, but they got a lot of guys that can give you innings to get you through a tournament. And I think where some other teams, it's going to drop off a cliff after 5-6 arms, Kentucky is a team that can maybe go a dozen and still be okay. And again, with style of play and everything, that was a good series win. Now they're brutal. Their remaining schedule is brutal.
I saw that, yeah.
But I wouldn't bury them yet.
No, I think they're going to win. I think they'll win at least 3 of their last 9 games, maybe 4.
Okay, Door Fan 6, what have you heard about the new renovations for the Hawk?
Basically what everybody else seen. I'm excited about the cover that's going to go over the stands, personally, because I like that. I would like that where I sit. But seating capacity, I'm not sure if it's ever come out what that's going to wind up looking like. I would think in the 4,500 range. I mean, if you're adding 800 seats, it seats 3,700 with 300 standing room only. So I figure you're looking at 4,500. I don't think we need any more than that. I think that's fine. But I'm excited about it. I think it's going to be fantastic.
I know people will say, well, why do you need more seats when you don't sell your building out as it is? They have made it a premium product where tickets are not cheap, and a lot of ticket holders just hold tickets and sit on them, and they live out of town or live somewhere else. And so you've got, I think, several hundred tickets that are off limits. You know what I'd like to see them do? I would like to see them do something like they did in basketball a few years ago. You remember where David Williams knocked the tickets down to $100 a ticket and people started coming in droves?
Right.
I would like to see them do that in baseball, make them outfield seats, make them maybe at the ends of the second deck down the lines or something, and let the people that want to buy those tickets and have them as a status symbol for I get to sit behind home plate or whatever and give money to the baseball program. Let them do that, but start making room to let the common fan in again. And I think that might do wonder. We've talked about ad nauseum about how their crowd is, golf crowd sometimes makes it look, less tame than it is. I mean, it's just, we've had this discussion for years.
Well, let me say, I always describe our Vanderbilt baseball crowd as Dodger Stadium because they come late and they leave early.
Yep.
And that's a problem. But also, Chris, if you go back and look at old video of when we started turning this thing around big time in 2006, 2007, that place was rabid.
Yes, it was.
Because
I remember.
It was new. It's new. It's like what Tennessee, because they're finally winning in baseball, their crowds have been like a couple of years. And if you continue to win for 20 years, people sit back and expect, okay, well, what are we going to win by today? They kind of get that tea and crumpet feel to them of, well, I'm here at the game. I'll just lightly clap because I know we're going to win. It's just by how much. And we become spoiled. And I'll be honest with you, everybody, I think that's just human nature to become, you remember, you're a Braves fan. You remember the Braves.
Oh, yes.
When they won so many years, the crowds were not great there at the end of those Bobby Cox runs. And that's why people get complacent with winning as well as they do with losing.
You take away the whistlers, you take away Murray Harris. The only noise that crowd makes is to gripe at the home plate umpire.
Well, now, wait a minute. You got Schmittou over there with his Shrek mask on.
Is that Schmittou? I thought that was the other whistler.
Oh, it may be. I don't know. I thought it was Mike Smith. I'm sorry.
Well, it's hard to make noise with the mask on your head. So,
I
wish we could give both whistlers a Shrek mask. That would solve a lot of things.
And I will say this: I think Vanderbilt's the fans that are there, and I'm not talking about the corporate empty seats and that type of thing, but the 2,000 or so that really show up are have become very knowledgeable about baseball, which was something I didn't think I'd ever see at Vanderbilt, but they are.
That's correct.
The people that sit around me are very knowledgeable about baseball, and I enjoy that.
Okay, boy, here's a couple of $1 million questions on the way out here. These could take a while potentially, depending on how much we decide to answer or not answer, and I could very much lean two different ways on that. J2M, will better facilities matter as much in the age of NIL and entitlement culture? Spoiler alert, Luke and I have been sort of talking for a few days about cooking up a state of the athletics programs kind of thing, hitting on facilities, but also really hitting on NIL, because I think that is I don't know that the hidden iceberg does it justice. I think that most people, or a lot of people, are starting to realize this is a big problem for them. But anyway, I'll let you take that where you want to take it. We are talking about we're potentially thinking about getting together a podcast with me, you, a football player, a baseball player, and a basketball player to hit this from all angles, and where I'll probably be the MC more than anything. But in terms of just hitting all these topics all at once from different angles, that has been something you and I have been discussing. It'll just be a matter of getting the right people and getting them all together at the right time. But you're welcome to give a Cliff Notes answer between now and then.
Well, it's not just Vanderbilt. And let me say, obviously this is a Vanderbilt podcast, but my concern is for the Vanderbilts, the Wake Forest, the academies. And I'm talking about in all sports, not just football or basketball. I'm talking everything. If this continues down the road it is on, and basically it's just highest bidder and that's it, and the only other way you can do things and get it correct is by culture, then everybody that's not a state school that doesn't have a big alumni base is going to shell out tons of money to bring in recruits or bring in the athletes. It's going to be a problem for a lot of teams, and you're going to see a lot of people just throw up their hands and say, look, we're not doing this. Now, the strange thing for Vanderbilt is this is right when they just spent the $300 million. Okay, so it's obvious we're not thinking in terms of going the other direction. It's that we're moving forward. Now, does that mean we're moving forward to have a nicer facilities for visiting teams? Or does that mean we're going to do everything else there is? And I go back to the same thing I've been saying, and I've gotten some criticism for it. I lived through a bunch of athletic directors and a bunch of personnel in the athletic department. The most important thing isn't even in that building. The most important thing is Chancellor Dearmeyer, just like it was with Gordon Gee. Those are the two that genuinely cared about athletics. And that's where we're at right now. So it's critical that Chancellor Dearmeyer stays the course with what he's doing, because he'll have answers for all this. He's going to have to, because I think that's one of his things. As much as academia hates to hear this, one of Chancellor Dearmeyer's, he was in shock. I can tell you this. He was in shock how poor our basketball and football programs were when he got here. Evidently, he had been told that it was in better shape than it was. So once he got here and saw that, and then saw the yeah. But once he got here and saw the situation, he realized he had to roll up his sleeves as well. And that's something that I'm sitting directly on a fence on right now. I'm meeting with someone next week who will remain nameless, who was a former player at Vanderbilt, and we're going to talk about it because we've got some issues to work out that other schools don't have to worry about. And this is the most critical time in Vanderbilt athletics history.
Were you suggesting that Vanderbilt administrators would maybe construct a narrative that was a facade?
No, I would never say that.
I wouldn't either. And I tell you what I did used to suggest was that they needed major facilities upgrade, and the alumni portion of that of the fan base was just up in arms that no, they were fine and they didn't need anything.
Well, you don't.
It was not a good place to spend money.
Yeah, you don't need anything if you've never gone and looked at anybody else's. You know, that's the thing. I used to tell people when we go on road trips, I always on Friday or when we arrive at the other school, go look at their facilities, and I'd be like, wait a minute, what? I understand why ours isn't as big as this, but why is it not even touching some of these other schools? And then you start thinking, well, we would be fine if we were playing Harvard and Cornell, you know, and going to their places. The facilities would be as good or better. But, you know, people, look, facilities do matter, but I do also get that that's not the end all to be all to end all. It's not. The other things that have to get done, and there again, I go right back to Deermeyer. It's on him. I'm throwing it right on his shoulders. It's on him because that athletic department can only do so much. They got to all be pulling that rope the same direction, Chris. And for the first time in a long time, I'm holding out hope that that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's the NIL thing, and I need to get a little more on this, but there are some red flags / yellow flags with them losing him. And I don't mean towards the staff. I just mean towards the situation. Because from what I hear, he was not a problem kid, and I don't think he's a guy that walked around with his hand out.
I'm sorry.
Could be wrong, but from what I have heard, that's the preliminary take on that. And I don't think he had an issue with the staff either. The Jadias Richard, who hit the portal last week, their starting corner.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if I don't think he's transferred anywhere else as we do this on Wednesday. I don't know if that's recoverable or not, but that to me was, that was potentially problematic, and maybe indicative of where they are with NIL.
Well, and one other thing I want to touch on, we always tend to look at who does leave. We also need to look at who stayed. It was like C.J. Taylor and Mahoney.
Right.
And Swan. You have to look at that too. That's who you've retained. So, you know, if you really got, you know, like Sam Hartman left Wake Forest for Notre Dame. So it happens. It's going to happen it even happens to programs that are winning for whatever reason. So our problems though are not just, I know again, it's a Vanderbilt podcast, but this is for all the private schools out there and all the academies, schools like that. They've got to look in the mirror and figure out what to do.
Yeah. Okay, last one. I cannot believe this is a question. HD Young 3, would addressing the culture around basketball be enough to stabilize the roster going forward, or is this the new normal? Now, look, what I hear on good authority is that only 5.8% of people have a problem with the way the basketball program is run. So let's just throw that out there as fact, and I'll let you take it from here.
Well, look, everyone knows.
They all seem to. There seem to be also a disproportionate representation of the 5% in the transfer portal. Also, by the way, but I'm sure that means nothing.
Look, if you lose 7 guys, let's just forget how they left. You've got some that were supposedly told that you're not going to play anymore. Well, we've got 3 open spots right now that will bring you back if you want to play. I can tell you that. Now, it's not over with yet. We can pull a rabbit out of the hat. I don't know how many rabbits are left out there, but that could still happen. When you lose that much off of a team that was playing as good as anybody in the country in the last 2-3 weeks of the season, that speaks a volume about your culture. It has to. Say what you want. It does. Now, also that NIL and money and stuff like that, and a player having a child that needs money. That factors in. All that factors in. I get that. But and I don't know that it's an issue, but there's a graduate school piece to this that I don't fully understand. I've been told one thing, and then I've also been told something else. So I don't know what's the truth there. But Vanderbilt has to solve that. Again, this is when you have one more year, and I will say this again. I've said it already. Jerry Stackhouse and the Vanderbilt men's basketball team must go to the NCAA tournament next year, or we have a new coach. That's that simple. And that's where we're at. We're backed into a corner, and you can throw blame however you want to throw it, but we all know that culture is a big part of it.
I know this is preposterous to suggest, and I can't believe I'm even suggesting it, but is there a chance there was maybe a problem with the culture this year?
5.8% chance anyway.
Yeah, I mean it's so small that I don't think it's even worth discussing, but just trying to cover all the bases here, Luke.
Well, that's
okay.
Thorough.
Yeah, well, I'll hold my thoughts.
Somebody's got to be thorough.
Somebody's got to be thorough. I've found myself wanting to be a lot less thorough with basketball the last couple of years, in case people ever wonder why that doesn't get discussed as much on the show. Anyway.
At some point, you get tired of beating your head against the wall.
Oh, you know what? I think April next year we could have some very interesting podcasts potentially. Just going to throw that out there.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with that, let's
one
end
thing
this.
we didn't touch on. Yeah,
sure.
I was gonna say we need to touch on the Alabama series since it starts tomorrow night. I'm going down. I'm actually going down for the first game. I think this is important. If we can get one for sure, we got to get one for sure. If we can get two at Alabama, we're in great shape heading into the final 2 weeks. I don't know a lot about Alabama. I've only seen them play twice this year. I think they're better than advertised. I think at times they're really good. It's graduation weekend, so there'll be great crowds, I assume. But yeah, I'm going down to see it live Thursday night. Not going to be able to stay the whole weekend, but I'm excited about they can really go ahead and seal their fate a little bit if they could win two or somehow sweep that series.
I think the two most similar teams in the league to Vanderbilt are the one Vanderbilt just played and the one it's playing this weekend.
Okay, that's fair.
Although I think that Vanderbilt's starting pitching now is Alabama had a chance to really have good pitching, but they just cannot stay healthy.
Yeah, I don't know their health situation. Is it starters or bullpen guys that's injured?
It's mostly starters.
Gotcha.
And I can't. They've had so many injuries of guys coming and going. I can't even keep up with who's who anymore.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's been bad.
I know it's hit Arkansas hard. It's hit Arkansas big time.
Now, you know what's interesting is I think, and to me from the outside it seems unfair, but the thing that I've learned in sports journalism is that if you're not close to a situation, a lot of times you have no idea what you're talking about. I know that's a crazy take, but that fan base and even a person or two I've talked to in the media down there are not really high on that situation. And from afar to me, it looks okay. I think that's a hard place to win at baseball for a number of reasons. And again, I think that they've assembled a lot of pitching talent. They just can't keep it healthy. But the take from the ground there is a little different than the one I gave you.
Right.
All right, I guess we're done.
We're out of here.
Well, we will see what we can get together. And here's the other thing. We might even wait to have some of the discussion till potentially after, although that's a long time. If we're going to do a roundtable, because I think a lot of the NIL issues people have questions about now and status stuff. So we may try to get together sort of a roundtable podcast on NIL and facilities and again, have representation across different sports, or and it probably is going to depend on when we can pull that off. But to me, there's a lot of baseball to cover right now. I don't know how we balance all that. Maybe we do an extra episode or whatever, but we'll figure it out.
Yeah, whatever works out. That'd be fine. We know at some point we're going to do it.
Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you, Chris. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.